Hello and welcome once again to Habits and Health Span, an Amway podcast. We are excited once again to dive into things talking about health span. My name is Alyssa. I'm joined by some incredible guests who we'll get to in just a minute. And as always, John, my co-host. Hello, John.
Hi, Alyssa. So great to see you.
You as well. What's going on in your life these days?
What's going on with me in terms of my health span journey? You know, Alyssa, one thing I'm preparing for is a half marathon.
Okay.
I know. You've heard me in the past. I've mentioned I've run a half marathon before, and I actually ran a marathon last year.
Last year. Okay, I was wondering when it was.
And so this half marathon is coming up in just a couple weeks. And you know what the crazy thing is? As I'm saying all these things, I still don't consider myself a runner. Do you consider yourself a runner?
I say more because I think I understand.
There's people who identify as running is what I do.
Yes.
And I go, no, I just happen to do half marathons and marathons for fun. Oh, wait, I might be a runner.
See, I have said this before because I will never say I am a runner because to me that says, I don't know. It says it qualifies you as something else, but I run. I'm not a runner.
That's totally fair.
But I've had people tell me, no, if you run, you are a runner. So John, I'm here to tell you, I think you're a runner.
All right, you heard it here first. Definitively, I am now statused as a runner.
Good. Congratulations.
And another runner that we have at the table, at least someone who, just before we were beginning, was sharing 10 marathons. Incredible. We have Dr. Arun Rajgopal, who's going to be guiding us along with Dr. David Walker, who is calling in through a really amazing topic today. I'm super looking forward to getting into it.
Me too. Let's do it.
Dr. Arun Rajgopal is a principal research scientist at Amway. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, John and Alyssa. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been in Amway in the science department under research and development for now 18 years. And I've been researching on why phytochemicals, and phytochemicals are just natural products, compounds, which is present in the plants, how they benefit us in our health and wellness. And before that, I was in academia researching on how some of the vitamins enter into our body. Once we take in to have its function, it has to enter our body. And so that is what I was researching.
Well, we're looking forward to picking your brain today. Thank you so much.
And we also have Dr. David Walker with us today. He's a member of the Amway Scientific Advisory Board. He's also a professor in the Department of Integrative Biology and Physiology at UCLA. Dr. Walker, welcome to you.
Thank you. Great to be here. Great to meet you. And it's a great pleasure to be here today and talk about health span and cell vitality.
That's great. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I'm a basic molecular biologist or geneticist by training, but my interest, and this is a long-term interest going all the way back to graduate school, is in the biology of aging, the basic molecular and cellular mechanisms that not just occur with age, but actually drive the aging process, specifically trying to find ways to identify what are the most important cellular mechanisms of aging, and of course trying to find ways to counteract those cellular aging phenotypes and promote healthy aging. And so as a field, the field has really identified something like 12 major hallmarks of aging at a cellular level. And I have interest in a lot of those, but really I found myself studying 4 or 5 of those aging hallmarks. So one of the major hallmarks we study is something called the autophagy pathway. This is a cellular recycling pathway within our cells, and I expect we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later in this conversation. And another long-term or long-established hallmark of aging is the accumulation of damaged or dysfunctional mitochondria. And that's something we're really interested in studying as well. And another major hallmark of aging, and I think this is one that really many of us in the field believe is actually driving age-onset pathology and driving age-onset health decline, is chronic inflammation. And so that is something we're really interested in trying to better understand. What is the underlying sources or causes of chronic inflammation? And critically, can we do anything about that with age?
So I'd actually love to just hop right into it if you don't mind. As we're talking about these cells and how they're aging or various ways they undergo stress, I like to start by saying, what are we holding this up against? What do healthy cells look like? What does cellular health look like? Perhaps, David, you could start us off?
Yeah, so I think, we can think about cell health the way we would think about organismal or health in people, and that is basically being able to carry out the function of the cell. And so different cells in our body are of course have different functions. We have heart cells, we have cells that comprise the brain, neurons, and glia, and they each typically have specialized function. And so when we think about cell health, it's really the capability and capacity to carry out those functions. And unfortunately, sometimes that gets lost with age.
And just to add, what David was saying, so he spoke about the specialized, cells like heart cells and the liver cells or the brain cells. And yes, as a human organism, he was talking about the organismal body, we are made up of different organs. And these organs are made of cells. This idea about, cell health, I like to say that think of a wall as a tissue, as an organ, and the bricks as cell. And if there are some faults on the bricks, the wall will collapse. And that is the reason you will become sick. And as we age, that happens. And along with that, to get cues from the body, what is happening to the body so that it can maintain itself, which in scientific term is called homeostasis, kind of having a balance in the function.
That's great. Thank you both for sharing these things. It's so helpful for me to have word pictures like the wall and the building blocks of the things that make up the wall. So thank you for that. I'm curious, we hear a lot about cellular health. First of all, could you define what cellular vitality is? And then is that the same? Is cellular vitality the same as cellular health?
Yes, sure, Alyssa. And before I answer that question, thank you for, kind of saying the building blocks, because the building blocks of the organs are cells, and then the building blocks of the whole body are organs. And that is how, the hierarchical way which the whole body is composed of, and cell is the lowest denominator factor, and which helps in the overall health. And coming back to cell health, so as I like to see, cell health has got two pillars. One pillar is cell vitality, and the other pillar is the cellular resilience. And to define cell vitality, the functions that a cell does, like a heart cell or a brain cell, the function it does for the organ to do its work, that is the cell vitality. And then the next part, the cellular resilience, that is about repairing and keeping it healthy. So the cell health has got the cellular vitality, which is the function the cell is doing. And then the other is also a function, but a repair function to keep the cell healthy.
I feel like I'm getting a pretty good grasp on what it looks like when the cells are working as they should. David, you mentioned earlier about cells aging. Could you speak a little bit now about what happens to us as we age, as these cells are getting impacted by stress and other factors?
Yeah, well, that was a great, definition. And of course, with respect to cell vitality and cell resilience, of course, one thing I'd add is the two things are connected. So as cell resilience declines with age, that is going to rob the capacity of the cell to carry out its function. And so that is exactly what we see with age. Now, some of the really interesting questions, of course, are, does this happen to all cells within our body? Does this happen to all cells at a similar level within our body? Are certain, organ systems, which are comprised, of course, of cells, uniquely susceptible to age-related changes? Or another, question you can add on top of that is, what are the consequences to an entire organism of specific loss of cell vitality within specific organ systems. And so these are all, highly interconnected questions that, biologists in the field are really, trying to provide better understanding.
So piggybacking off of that, David, what does it specifically look like when some of those specific cells are losing their vitality, maybe in terms of how that's manifesting in terms of health that we're going to notice?
Yeah, as you can imagine, there's a lot of things that change within cells as they age, and many of those things are presumably important. But one factor that we've seemed to see that is very important is cells seem to lose their capacity to degrade and clear components within the cell. So cells are full of components. They're comprised of nuclei. They're comprised of various organelles and lipids and proteins and DNA within the cell. And with the process of aging, often what we see is there's an accumulation of those components within the cell. And that seems to be due to a decline in the ability to recycle the contents of the cell. And we think this is something that not only occurs with age, we think about this as a key driver of the aging process. And so this is a key cellular pathway. It's called the autophagy pathway. It's present within most cells within our body. And there's good news and there's bad news. So the good news is this pathway is present within all of our cells, and it has the capacity to clean the contents of the cell, to prevent the accumulation of damaged or broken or superfluous components within the cell, which can accumulate with age. So that's the good news. We all have this pathway within our cells. The bad news is this pathway doesn't function quite so well as we get older. And so that loss of function of this pathway is what we think leads to the accumulation of different components within the cells. And that we think is a major driving force, not only of cellular aging, but actually of organismal aging.
Arun, I'm curious. We're talking about, David's talking about these various components that they're having trouble recycling. Can you speak to how they're getting there in the first place? Perhaps I'm misunderstanding.
No, of course. And just to, put this in a perspective, as I said, that cellular health has got the two pillars, the cellular vitality and the cellular resilience. And what David is talking about is that cellular resilience component. There's a lot of accumulation of some damages which is happening, and the cell cannot remove those damages. And that is why, because your cellular resilience is getting compromised. And what David was telling is that the whole autophagy pathway to remove those damages are getting slower.
All right, so we just heard some of these from Arun, but David, I'm wondering, can you share maybe some additional early indicators that our cell health is declining? And then I'm very curious, is there anything we can do about it?
Yeah, so there are a number of hallmarks of aging that are getting consensus in the field. And the one big question is the one you asked. What are the primary cellular events that actually lead to the downstream changes that lead to aging as we see it, when we look in the mirror? And yeah, again, the loss of this cellular pathway of autophagy seems to be a primary cellular hallmark of aging, meaning it's one of the, not only the first things that goes wrong, but it can be, it's an origin point for many of the other secondary and responsive changes that occur within our cells. The question of what can we do about it? There is, again, good news there that both dietary changes and physical activity seem to be robust ways that you can actually activate this pathway within cells.
All right, so I'm hearing we just need to keep moving, John, right? We just need to be actual runners so that we can somehow reverse
Absolutely.
these
And
things.
absolutely on that cue, that exercise, as David also mentioned, is one of the most proven way to improve your cellular health. And if somebody asks me what, I should do for improving the cellular health, I will say first and foremost is your nutrition. have a very well-balanced, plant-rich nutrition with low amount of processed food. Mind you, I'm saying low because in this world, anywhere in this world, it is nearly impossible to be free of processed food. That is the world we are living in.
I really appreciate that.
And so low processed food, low, sugar, if it is possible. Along with that, have 7 hours of sleep. These are like the low-hanging fruits. Balanced diet, 7 hours or nice sleep. Along with that, your flexibility and movement. And then kind of have, friend circle. Have a community along with yourself.
Alyssa, one thing that we've been talking about a lot on this podcast, episode to episode, is how this all overlaps. And as you were talking, Arun, I couldn't help but think how many of our experts have told us, John, get a good night's sleep, eat healthy, and exercise. It really is applying to everything we're talking about.
Yes, and even the community element too.
Yes.
We've talked about that before, and how we're seeing that is a really important thing when it comes to our actual health too.
I would not be able to run my half marathon without my best friend by my side. That's true. Now, I'm thinking a lot. You were sharing all these practical things that we can do and really taking it from the science down into our actions. But it does make me think, what's coming next? I'm really curious. And David, we'll start with you. What are the latest learnings from health span research that maybe our listeners might be interested in? Emerging scientific breakthroughs or any trends about health span that are affecting our daily lives?
Yeah, so in my lab, what we do is we use an animal model, the fruit fly Drosophila, as a model organism to study the basic biology of aging. So we work with flies because they recapitulate many of the aspects of aging in people, but they do so much quicker. And also, we can manipulate their genes one by one. We can change their diet. We can change their lifestyle. And we can really get mechanistic insight into what's actually causing aging. And we actually did some collaborative research recently with Arun here, looking at feeding different botanical extracts to fruit flies. So that's something we did relatively recently.
It was great that, David mentioned that collaboration. Where, we showed that some botanicals can activate the pathway of autophagy in fruit flies. But, a word of caution that what we see in fruit fly may not be exactly true in humans, but we hope to be true, but it is not true yet. And before, I delve deeper into some practical things which, everybody can do to improve our cell health from the latest science, what is emerging from the work what David does and other scientists does who work on aging. But before that, I want to say, along with good night sleep and community, there are a few other things you can do, and these are very, very easy to do. And one of those is very simple: stress management and some kind of mindfulness. Mindfulness being like just being present in what is happening and what you are doing. For example, I'm trying to be mindful in this discussion about health span.
Well, Arun, I'm so glad that you brought it back to actionable steps, because that's what this podcast is really about. Hearing some incredible science, but then trickling it down into our day-to-day activities, which I think, Alyssa, takes us pretty well to one of our favorite parts of the podcast.
I agree. I think you've already led us there so well. We like to sort of at the end of the podcast narrow it down to a couple, maybe 1 or 2 actionable steps that people listening, including ourselves, can sort of take all this science information, which is so good, and do things. What can we do today to make a difference in this area? So you hit a couple of those things. Would you like to just even more succinctly say?
Sure.
And then, David, we'd love to hear from you too. Just a couple of actionable items that we can do today.
Yeah, absolutely. Modern science, or the new science, what it is teaching us is that there are 2 big changes happen as we hit that middle age. One is we are losing our muscle mass more rapidly, and our cellular health is declining. And what you can do is you can go to gym or at home, do exercise with weights to preserve your muscle mass and be mindful about the protein you're taking. And one last important thing you can do is try to avoid plastics as much as you can in your daily life.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. David, what are some action steps we can take?
Well, I agree with all those points. Small things I would add. One thing I tried to practice is take a walk after dinner. So instead of eating dinner and then going and sitting down right afterwards, just go take a walk in your neighborhood, walk around the block, and it helps, it's a very pleasant thing to do. It helps, digestion. Call your mother. Call your mother will bring connection, and it will, ground you in, where you grew up and, what matters to you. And yeah, I like that mindfulness was mentioned earlier. We all, myself included, complain about what gets worse with age. Maybe this is anecdotal and maybe this is personal, but I actually find one benefit to getting older is you sort of do find yourself being more mindful and more in the moment and appreciative. Maybe it's because you're aware of the passage of time. And, being mindful, being optimistic. There are studies suggesting that optimists may live longer than pessimists. So that's something that some of us, have to struggle with, to be optimistic. But I think it has benefits beyond our mood. But basically, I agree. Being physically active and eating a nutritious diet. Those are the two things that are going to most impact our everyday health for sure.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks to both of you for joining us today and sharing so much of your insight and wisdom. Arun, thank you so much for being here.
It was a pleasure. This is fun. Thank you.
And David, thanks so much for calling in. We really appreciate it.
Great and interesting conversation. Thank you.
And thanks to all of you for listening at home. Make sure to like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe on YouTube, and we'll see you next time. I got to go for a walk and call my mom.
See you next time.